either choose to take actions which are going to enhance and improve the environment in the long term, or continue to add to its degradation.
The Bay of Fundy, it's the cafeteria of the ocean. What you do here, you know, even on land, if somebody builds a golf course or the way that you handle your sewage, it impacts all of us.
Here comes the tide, rolling in again. I'm standing beside a trusted ancient friend. Whales and weirs singing your tune, coming alive to the pull of the moon. Here comes the tide, rolling in again.
During my 20 years as an environmental attorney for the Riverkeeper movement, the Bay of Fundy has always had this kind of mystical symbolism, because almost all of the major Riverkeeper rivers on the East Coast are also shad fisheries.
When I was a boy, there were hundreds of little wharves like the one ashore here from us now, and at that time there were hundreds of people fishing in St. John Harbour. There were dozens of weirs which were for Gaspereau and herring and shad.
And we have this vast school of shad that starts off the year in the springtime, early spring, off the coast of Florida. And then as the water hits about 51 degrees, this school moves northward, following that temperature. They all end up at the end of the spring in the Bay of Fundy. And the reason they come here is this is where they come to get fat, because the nutrients that are roiled around by the tidal action, this extreme tidal action of the Bay of Fundy, suspends all these nutrients, which create an abundance in the water that the shad need for their survival. And so what you do in the Bay of Fundy affects all of those other estuaries up and down the East Coast, where we all have riverkeepers. What you do with your sewage, what happens when somebody spills oil or when there's toxics, all of that ultimately impacts us directly, because this is the place that the shad come, that are so critical to the economies and to the culture and to the palate of all of these different communities up and down the East Coast.
Well, raw sewage is a real problem in St. John Harbour here. From a third to a half of the sewage in the city goes into the waters of the harbor untreated. And in fact, all the sewage from the central part of the city, just where we're standing here in downtown St. John in front of Market Square and the Hilton Hotel, there's a major sewer which serves the buildings in the area here and runs right out into St. John Harbour. And then just upstream, above this wharf here, there are a number of other sewers which are putting waste into the harbor from residential areas. And it's not only a problem for the waterfront and the pleasantness of the waterfront of the community of St. John, but the sewage goes out into the Bay of Fundy. It's caused extensive shellfish closures, and it's affecting the biological communities in the bay.
Waste not, want not, caught in the kelp. I don't know who needs the help. Is it you being broken bit by bit?
Courtney Bay has gotten worse. The raw sewage aspect of the area has increased over time. Maybe not many new pipes, but just more buildup in the eastern part of the city and more sewage flowing out. And at one time, before the causeway was built there were fisheries, which were fairly important. Almost every fall there was a fishery there for herring, which were used for sardines and that sort of thing. And there were smelt which came in there, and people recreationally fished in the Marsh Creek area as well. I guess the harbor is something that a lot more people are focusing on nowadays. There's been the new trail put around the harbor, and of course there's more people, I guess, just involved in watching, observing the nature that's around, the ducks in the harbor seals, these sorts of things. And of course the continued impact of the raw sewage is very detrimental to species using the harbor. We've certainly seen declines in the fish, and it's unpleasant, certainly for people to, at times to be around the harbor front, particularly when the tide's down on hot days in the summertime. In some areas, it's decidedly unpleasant, the stench and what people are seeing in the water.
I am a fervent advocate for waterfront development, and if you look at the United States, the major cities that have enjoyed rebirth or resurrection over the past 2 decades have all begun with waterfront development. Baltimore and New York and San Francisco and Boston and Chicago. That investment in their waterfront was critical to restoring and resurrecting the spirit of the entire city. But all of them first cleaned up their water, because there's no point restoring the waterfront if it's a waterfront above a ruined water body. When I was working on the Hudson River 20 years ago, the least valuable property in the waterfront communities was the property that was closest to the river, because nobody wanted to live there, and nobody could really use the river. But today, now that we've cleaned up the river, we invested in sewage treatment, and we didn't need to invest a lot in waterfront development, because the waterfront development came to the river, because people all of a sudden started using it. You all of a sudden got boat traffic, you got swimmers, and you got water skiers, and you got shellfishers and fishermen and people who were using the river right up to the waterfront. And it became an area of vibrant activity and economic vitality, and that generated an engine that restored the waterfronts up and down the Hudson River on all of these waterfront towns, which were dilapidated and dying. They are now the most vibrant towns in the Hudson Valley. But it's not because they all of a sudden said we should restore our waterfront. We restored the river, and the waterfronts followed.
Here comes the tide, rolling in again. Here comes the tide, rolling in again.
One thing that people, particularly living in the St. John area and the surrounds, can lobby their politicians for is cleanup of the raw sewage from municipal sewage pipes that's running into the harbor and degrading the natural environment. We should now be demanding that resources be put in place to clean up this mess, to clean up the waters of St. John Harbour and the Bay of Fundy.
Here comes the tide,